I'm Nintendo.
And I'm Sega.
This is Console War! Hey, Ken! What are you doing here?
Hey, Rio?
Ah, right.
So, how you been?
Good. Pretty good.
Hey, excuse me, Ken? Can I get an autograph?
Hang on a second, Rio. It's another one of these guys. You know what it's like. So embarrassing. Here we go.
You look just like Ken. Are you a cosplayer or something?
That's awkward.
No. I know we look alike, but I'm not Ken. I'm Rio.
No, Ryu has dark hair.
Not Ryu. Rio. With an O.
Oh. Ryu has dark hair.
Hey, get out of here before I turn your face into a bloody pulp! Cheese and crackers. Can you believe that guy?
Can you really blame him? You're kind of a copy of me.
What are you talking about? No, I'm not.
Come on. Your look is the same as mine.
Our hair is totally different, and our gears aren't even the same color. In this lighting, they do look kind of similar, I guess.
And you stole my moves.
No, you have a two-handed Hadouken, which is totally different than my one-handed Kououken.
Right. Yeah, totally different. Silly me. Ow, almost forgot my Band-Aid.
Band-Aid?
Yeah, they overcharged you a little bit, so, whip out one of these bad boys, slide it on in there. Boom, that's a free meal.
But aren't you rich?
Yeah, but I'm still, really cheap. Anyway, maybe you should try to be me.
Huh?
Try to be me. People already think you're a poor man's Ken.
Nobody thinks that. Do people think that?
Yeah, if it makes your life better, pretend to be me. You got my permission. I'd pretend to be somebody else if I could. And get away with murder.
I don't want to be you. It doesn't bother me when people think I'm you.
Hey, Ken! Can I get an autograph? What are you supposed to be? Poor man's Ken?
I'm gonna rip your lungs out, you sniveling little muffin!
Ryo!
Who do you think you are? Nobody knows who you are!
That was the scene at a bar today as a man who looks just like Ken Masters was fighting with customers. It is unknown if they will be pressing charges. Up next, these brands of peanut butter can kill you. We'll find out more after the break.
Whoa! That guy that flipped out next to Ken! That's Ryo Sakazaki!
Are you sure?
I'm pretty sure. I used to play Art of Fighting all the time. Well, for the Sega Genesis.
Right. But it was much better for the Super Nintendo.
What? That's it! Are we doing this?
Did Stan Lee originally want to call the X-Men the Merry Mutants, but was rejected by Marvel publisher Martin Goodman, who claimed that readers wouldn't know what a mutant was, so instead they went with the name X-Men, with the X referring to the mutants' extra power? Yes.
Best Art of Fighting.
Art of Fighting was originally released for the arcade in 1992. Developed by SNK, it was their second fighting franchise after Fatal Fury and is set in the same universe. The game was successful enough to have not one, but two sequels.
The original Art of Fighting had many ports, Neo Geo, Neo Geo CD, and TurboGrafx 16. Today we're looking at the Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis versions. Very similar, but there are some differences. Which one's better? Let's find out.
Look at these games is very similar.
It's a simple fighter. Both versions have all the same looking levels, all the same looking characters and animations, and all the same looking bonus stages.
At a quick glance, everything looks the same.
Almost the same. Even right off the bat you can see my game has big differences. Look at the zooming.
The Super Nintendo has the zooming effects from the original Neo Geo game. It zooms in where characters are close and zooms out when they're far apart. This is missing completely from the Sega game.
Sure, I don't have zooming, but it does limit your game.
Look how small the screen size is on Super Nintendo. The HUD takes up a good portion, and then everything behind it is black. There's also these black bar lines on the sides. The playing screen is really small. You can see so much more on Sega. You can see the detail in the architecture on this level. You can see the skylight on this level. The Super Nintendo view is limited by the smaller screen.
I may not be able to see up top, but some levels have more detail on Super Nintendo. Look at this level on Super Nintendo. Check out the neon signs in the background, flickering just like neon signs would. And on Sega, very little flickering. And check out this level. On Super Nintendo, both helicopter blades are moving, and the clothes of the pilots look like they're blowing in the wind. On Sega, nothing is moving. Not the pilot's clothes, not the propellers, and not even the smoke from this guy's cigarette.
Your game just has a good flicker effect.
My game has more details.
You really think that your game has more details? Well, prepare to be blown away.
Look at this level. On Sega, it has a Japanese lamp, a no smoking sign, and talismans on the columns. On Super Nintendo, it doesn't have any of that. Now look at this level side by side. There's a flickering light, floors made of tiles, and there's more people on Sega too. And you like moving smoke? On Sega, the bartender's smoking. It's the more interesting game to look at. And this level has the biggest difference. On Super Nintendo, it's an alley. There's not much there. But now check it out on Sega. Looks impressive as hell. That's some Mode 7 looking smoke there. If you look at any two levels side by side, you'll see more detail on Sega. Even on the levels where the Super Nintendo flickers.
And my levels aren't the only thing that look better.
Let's check out the bonus stages. Look at this bonus stage on Sega. There's not much, some candles, Shiminawa rope, but it's more than the Super Nintendo has, which is just a gradient effect. It's the same for the other bonus stage as well. And when you break those bottles on Sega, you see it fizz out. On Super Nintendo, nothing. Maybe they were just empty?
And one more thing.
The Sega game's just more colorful. Its color scheme has more pop. Super Nintendo's a little more monochrome.
There's no zoom, but the Sega game still looks better.
For having a bigger screen, having more details, and more colors that pop, best graphics go to Sega Genesis.
Presentation's similar too.
Right, but like I said before, my HUD doesn't take up half the screen, so my presentation's better.
It doesn't take up half the screen. And also, your HUD's missing something. The HUDs are pretty standard. You have a life gauge, spirit gauge, points, time, and number of victories. But Super Nintendo also has the character names and profile picture. Sega doesn't have either. Just 1P. They didn't even tell you the name before or after the fight, so there's a pretty good chance you have no idea who you're fighting.
Names are overrated. Let's go to the real atrocity here. The Super Nintendo game is censored.
Check out this level. On Sega, it's a bar. On Super Nintendo, it's a cafe. It's not the first time Super Nintendo's done that.
You want to talk censorship? Your game is censored. Let's talk about the character King. On Super Nintendo, when you beat King with a super move, it's revealed King is a girl. And you even see some of her clothes torn off. You don't get any of that on Sega. Babes on Super Nintendo?
That's not exactly something worth bragging about.
What? Why? What's wrong with beating the only female character in a game in an extremely violent manner, and then seeing her clothes torn off in a perverse fashion? Oh. I just got that.
Yeah, that's okay, but a bar is too risque. Weird choice, Nintendo.
Anyway, my game has something yours doesn't. Every 2 fights, the Super Nintendo game gives you a screen telling you how to do a special move for your character. You don't get that on Sega. You do get a random move on the continue screen, but you don't get to actually see it performed.
Okay, well, your game's missing cutscenes.
Between fights, both games have post-fight dialogue, a map, and then pre-fight dialogue. The Sega game, however, also has a cutscene with your fighter. Ryo is on his motorcycle, and Robert is in his sports car. You don't get any of that in Super Nintendo.
You're missing so much.
I'm missing so much? Let's look at the intros. The intros tell the same narrative, but the way it's done is so different. On Super Nintendo, it's done with in-game graphics. Not mind-blowing, but it works for the story. On Sega, you get character bios over the narrative. It just doesn't have the same storytelling effect as the Super Nintendo game.
So you use in-game graphics for the intros. I have character bios. Height, weight, got 'em. Thought you said I was missing something.
Let's look at the in-game cutscenes. Like we said, both games have a cutscene before every fight. The Super Nintendo has a little more though. If you play as Ryo, you see him kicking off his sandals. If you play as Robert, you see him adjusting his gloves. On Sega, both characters just stand there. No extra animations.
That's still not much.
Time for the kill. Let's go to the endings.
The endings start off the same. Taking out the boss, karate. Then Yuri tells you to stop. Why? On Sega, she says, "That man is R." To be continued. Alright, weird ending. I guess it'll be revealed in the sequel. Or you could just play the Super Nintendo version. When you get to the "That man is R," you learn he's their father. It's such a revealing ending. There's even a connection to Geese Howard from the Fatal Fury series. You get this whole backstory of why the father did what he did and whether or not his kids will forgive him and all. Why is this not in the Sega game? I'd be so upset if I was stuck with the incomplete Sega ending while everyone with a Super Nintendo knew the fate of Ryo and Yuri's dad. It's like watching The Empire Strikes Back without learning the twist.
Obi-Wan never told you what happened to your father.
He told me enough. He told me you killed him.
No.
An oversight that large easily gives Super Nintendo the win.
For having names in the HUD, more animations, and for having the complete ending, best presentation goes to Super Nintendo.
The music is a little different.
Even though both games use Hiroshi Matsumoto's original tunes.
S-Itch gets credit for the music on Super Nintendo.
Joju Hakatapi and Yamapi I get credit on Sega.
Some songs sound similar.
And some are completely different.
Some sound better on Super Nintendo.
And some sound better on Sega.
This is gonna be tricky.
Maybe not. My game does have more music.
Let's talk about the music before and after the fights. The Super Nintendo game has music or sound effects just for pre-fight dialogue. It has something unique before every fight. The Sega game only has some dialogue-specific music. Most of the time, it just uses music from the level. Then, after every fight on Super Nintendo, the music is different for every character. On Sega, the music after every fight is the same.
An extra 5 seconds of music before and after a fight isn't much, and some of that's just sound effects.
Well, my game does have more sound effects, particularly the voiceovers.
On Super Nintendo, you hear the round number.
Round 1. Fight.
On Sega, you don't. On Super Nintendo in Versus mode, you hear the names of the fighters. On Sega, you don't. On Super Nintendo, you hear the bonus stage names.
Bottle cut.
On Sega, you don't.
Super Nintendo has more music and sound effects.
For having more music before and after fights, and having more voiceovers, best sound goes to Super Nintendo.
These are similar games that play like typical 90s fighters.
Since it was a Neo Geo arcade game, both versions use the 4-button scheme. You have one button for light punch, one for light kick, one button for hard attack that can be either punch or kick depending on your last attack, and a taunt button.
There are 10 total characters. Every player has special moves that drain your spirit gauge. You can charge it up again by holding down the attack button. Also, taunting can lower your opponent's spirit gauge.
There are different game types. There's story mode, the main one-player mode. It follows the story of Ryu's sister Yuri getting kidnapped. Because of this, there are only 2 playable characters, Ryo and Robert. The remaining players are your enemies.
This mode also comes with 3 different bonus games, and they're not just for fun, they actually help your character get stronger. A timing-based bottle-breaking minigame can increase your health. A button-mashing ice block breaking minigame can increase your strength, and a special move minigame can unlock a super attack.
The other game type is Versus mode. Here you can play against a friend as any of the other 10 characters.
Very standard fighters with not much really to separate them from all the other fighters in the 90s.
Not great games, but they get the job done.
And they're almost identical.
Almost identical, but there's something my game can do that yours can't.
The Sega game is able to utilize all 6 buttons. High punch, low punch, high kick, and low kick can all be their own button. Super Nintendo's stuck with the 4 buttons game.
I can also do one more thing.
On Sega, you can select what stage you want in Versus mode. You can't do that on Super Nintendo.
Are you done? Because my game has much better exclusives, like an extra game mode.
The Super Nintendo has an exclusive one-player mode. It lets you play as any character and pick your opponent. This is huge because it's the only way to play as any of the characters in one-player mode. You can only be Ryo and Robert in story mode, but here you can play as anyone. This mode is not in the Sega game. If you want to play as any character on Sega and you're by yourself, you have to go to the Versus mode and fight an unmanned player. It's a little sad, but it's the only way to play as any character on Sega.
Okay, it's a little sad, and maybe I did that some lonely days when I was crying, but I can still play as every character.
I still have other reasons my gameplay is better.
Not only can I do one player as every character, but every character on Super Nintendo has a desperation move. This is a move you can do when your life is low. It uses up most of your spirit gauge, but it does a lot of damage. Like I said, you can do this with every character on Super Nintendo. On Sega, only Ryo and Robert can do it.
And if that wasn't enough, I have one more reason my gameplay is better.
The game can be tough. Good thing Super Nintendo has unlimited continues. The Sega game only has 3. Good luck beating it. Also, Super Nintendo has more difficulty levels which actually create multiple endings. Simple if you do easy, the full story if you beat it on a harder setting. Sega only has 2 difficulties. Both have the same incomplete ending.
The Super Nintendo gameplay just has more.
For having an exclusive one-player mode to play as any character, desperation moves for every character, and having unlimited continues, best gameplay goes to Super Nintendo!
Both games are very similar, but one is better. That is the Art of Fighting for the Super Nintendo.
It may not have the details of the Sega game, but it does have zooming. It has better presentation with a more complete HUD, more animations during the cutscenes, and the full ending. It has better sound with more songs and a lot more voiceovers. It has better gameplay with an extra one-player mode, desperation moves for every character, and unlimited continues. The Sega game's not bad, but it certainly does feel incomplete. They're around the same price, so why not get the one that's more complete? Best Art of Fighting goes to Super Nintendo!
What now?
Hey, let's see what's on.
And now for some breaking news. Street Fighter sensation Ken Masters has been arrested for robbing a bank. Several eyewitnesses identified the golden-haired fighter at the scene. Here he is, the moment of his arrest.
It wasn't me! I didn't rob any bank! I put Band-Aids in sandwiches! Band-Aids in sandwiches!
With so many eyewitnesses on the scene, jail time is highly likely. Up next, these brands of potato chips will kill you. We'll find out more after the break.
Oh, come on!
Wow! Why would Ken do that? Unless it wasn't Ken. Unless it was...
Oh, of course Ken's in jail. Because that's all they saw.
That's all they ever see. But who's the poor man's Ken now? Not me! Not me! Cause I'm rich! Hey you! How much for them sandals? Oh, no, money's no option. I'll buy them right off ya. It's good to be the Ken.
Thanks for checking out our latest video. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Support us on Patreon for earlier releases, bonus content, and the Discord. Also check out our streaming channel, Console Wars Live. Special thanks to XaviorTheLycan for the donation of the 2 games. Be sure to check us out on Facebook, X, and Instagram for more Console Wars goodness. Later!
And to me, the nature of the beast does not involve selling out.